All right, chapter 22, 2 proportions, the interval. So we've been just doing 1, but now we're doing 2. So a 2 proportion hypothesis test compares 2 different groups the null hypothesis is that there is no difference so if our 2 groups are P1 and P2, then the null is P1 is equal to P2, and our alternative is that HA is either P1 is greater than P2, P1 is less than P2, or P1 is not equal to P2, depending on our context. Because our null hypothesis assumes the proportions are the same for each group, the center of our model is 0, and our standard error is calculated based on all of our data combined. So we would have p hat pooled, so that's like its subscript is pooled, is equal to the successes for 1 plus the successes for 2 all over n1 plus n2, where the top is the total successes and the bottom is the total subjects.
What did I say? Next to the P hat?
Pooled.
Pool.
Yeah. So it's just like combined, like if we put everything together. So then our standard error of p hat 1 minus p hat 2 is going to be the square root of p hat pooled Q hat pooled over N1, so this is all the information for 1, plus P hat pooled, Q hat pooled over N2. So then that's everything for 2. So then, since your null is that P1 is equal to P2, the model you use is the normal model of 0 and the standard error pooled. So that's this. And your Z is equal to the actual difference minus 0 over the standard error, or in terms, Z is equal to P hat 1 minus P hat 2 minus 0 over the standard error. And so then we have an example to look at of this. So I'll write the example and then I'll let you make sure you have it all down before we actually walk through it. So, in a survey of Americans 65 and older, it was found that 411 of 1,012 men and 535 of 1,062 women suffer from arthritis. Is there evidence that women are more likely than men to suffer from arthritis? You have that? Okay. All right, so I'm going to do this in parts here. So our null hypothesis is that the P for women is equal to P for men. So then our alternate, it says, is there evidence that women are more likely than men to suffer from arthritis? So that would mean that PW is greater than PM. So the condition stuff still applies. So it's a random survey. It doesn't specifically say it, but we're going to make an assumption since it's a survey of Americans that it was random. 1,012 plus 1,062, so for men and women, is certainly less than 10% of Americans over 65. Groups are independent because obviously if you're a man, you can't be a woman, and vice versa. So in order to do our success failure condition, we need to do a little bit of math first. So we're going to have to find p hat pooled before we do anything else. So that's going to be the 411 and the 535 over the total, so 1,012 plus 1,062. And just for the sake of time, that comes out to be 0.456. So that's P hat pooled, but we also need Q hat pooled. So to do that, we would just do 1 minus this number, which is going to be 0.544. And so then we would multiply everything to find, or make sure it meets the 10, you know what I mean, the success failure of being greater than 10. So N1 times P hat pooled is 1,012 times 0.456, and that's 461.6, which is greater than 10. We would do it N1 Q hat pooled is 1,012 times 0.544, which is 550.5, which is greater than 10. And then we would do the same thing for N2. So then N2 times P hat pooled, so that'd be 1,062 times 0.456, and that is 484.3, greater than 10. And then N2 Q hat pooled is 1,062 times 0.544, which is 577.7, which is greater than 10. Now, you could probably just make an assumption that that's going to all be bigger without actually having to write them all out. So, like, for the sake of the example, I'm writing them out, but you could kind of just do, like, a quick check. Now, if it was in the short answer part of the AP exam, I would probably write them out because the way they grade the short answer part is based on how much detail you give. So, like, the more detail you have, the more points you're going to earn on it. So, I would say, have faith. I think you can do better than that.
You're right. 2.
Well, 3 pretty much gets you out of it in most colleges, so
But it's not like
you could be my first 3.
your first. Everybody else failed.
No, I've had a lot of 2s.
We had 3s passing.
Yeah.
So no one.
But it's hard, like, it's a hard exam, though. I think you could do it. I think you're capable. As long as you don't fall asleep in the middle of the exam.
I'm gonna fall asleep on purpose.
Well, you'll either be taking it with Miss Holloway or Mr. Law, so. I proctored the English one last year.
English, down there. That's it. No matter how many times you wake me up, wake me up 5 times, I'll fall asleep 6 times.
All right, so all the conditions have been met. So next we look at the standard error of p hat 1 minus p hat 2. So this is the formula for, it's the p hat pooled, q hat pooled over, and then it's n1, and then the other one is the same thing but over n2. So 0.456 times 0.544 divided by 1012 plus 0.456 times 0.544 over 1062. And that number comes out to be 0.0219. Okay, now so the next thing that we would do is we would need to find this p hat 1 minus p hat 2 and then use the number we just found for standard error. So the number from the square root, and that's going on the bottom to solve it, which I don't have it worked out over here on the calculator, but I know there's a calculator way to do it, so I'm going to test it in just a second. But p hat 1 minus p hat 2 is going to be the 411 over 1012 minus 535 over 1062, and that comes out to be minus 0.097. So then they have you find z, which is of p hat 1 minus p hat 2, which is what we just found, so that number's going in there, minus 0 over the standard error, so that number is going on the bottom, the 0.0219. So that ends up being negative 4.458, and what they do is they look at the diagram, and it's this chunk over here, and they're looking at the table for p of z being less than negative 4.458, and then it comes out to be 0.000041. That's from a table. Let me see if I can find the calculator function really quick for it, and then I'll tell you how to type it in there because it's way easier. Let's see. Make sure this works first. 411. Okay. Well, this has one of the things backwards, but I know why it's backwards. So it's called 2 prop z test. Hold on. Wait. 1 second. Let me check something. Okay, yeah. So we would use the 2 prop z test, and it'll ask you for x1, n1, X2, N2, and then it asks you for, if it's like not equal to, less than, or greater than, and then it'll say like calculate. And for this one, because we're looking at the left side, you need to do 1 minus the p-value that you're given to actually get the number that we're looking for here, because it was like 0.999995 something. So you have to just do 1 minus to get it in this case, but that's what you use there. So then from that we can say, with a p-value of 0.0000041, I reject the null. There is enough evidence that women suffer from arthritis more often than men. So then kind of a bonus and something that some of the questions will ask you, it'll say or it'll ask you for like the confidence interval or how confident we are about that. And so when you reject the null, include a confidence interval of actual results, which we would do using a 2 prop z interval. So that's what I was checking to make sure up here was the test, and then the down here is the interval. And it'll ask you for x1, n1, x2, n2, and then it'll ask you for a confidence interval. And so I would say most of the time use 95% unless otherwise specified, or 0.95. As long as you specify, like say when you get to like the written section of like the AP exam, if you specify what interval you use, that's what they're looking for. So not so much that they care which one you pick, but 95 is kind of just like the general, like if we're not told, that's what they want us to use. And so when you type this in for this particular problem, it gives you negative 0.14 to negative 0.05. And so to interpret that, we would say men suffer 14 to 5% less often than women.